another Daily Mail TV exclusive, Too Posh to Push, Meghan Markle made her first husband agree to a pregnancy contract to make sure that she was afforded every possible luxury if she gave birth to their child. Charlie Langston has the exclusive details now from our New York newsroom. Charlie, what did this so-called pregnancy contract reveal?
The man who stayed silent for over a decade has finally spoken, and the reverberations from that single decision are shaking the very foundation of one of the most carefully constructed public images in modern history. We are not talking about a disgruntled ex. We are not talking about a tabloid source with an axe to grind. We are talking about Trevor Engelson, the Hollywood producer who was married to Meghan Markle before she became a duchess, before the Netflix deals, before the Oprah interview, before any of it. The man who knew her when she was just a cable TV actress trying to make it in a brutal industry. The man who helped build her. The man she left with nothing more than a FedEx envelope. And now, in 2026, he is reportedly done being quiet. Think about that for a moment. Over 10 years of silence. A decade of watching from the sidelines as the woman he once called his wife rewrote history, gave tearful interviews about her struggles, and fashioned herself into a global symbol of empowerment. 10 years of saying absolutely nothing while his own role in her story was quietly erased from the narrative. What kind of information does a man sit on for that long? What does it take to finally push someone across that line from dignified silence into full disclosure? That is exactly what we are going to break down today. Because the Trevor Engelson story is not just about a divorce. It is about a carefully constructed lie that may be about to come undone. And Prince Harry, sources say, is in total shock. Stay with us, because this is the story behind the story, and it changes everything. The man who knew too much. To understand why Trevor Engelson breaking his silence is such a seismic event, you first have to understand who he actually is and why his voice carries so much weight right now. Trevor Engelson is not a bitter nobody looking for 15 minutes of fame. He is a successful, respected Hollywood producer with a thriving career and a full life. He has a new wife, 3 children, and a production empire that he built through hard work and genuine industry relationships. He had every reason in the world to keep his head down, count his blessings, and let the past stay buried. That is exactly what made his silence so powerful, and what makes his decision to speak so explosive. For over a decade, Trevor played the role of the dignified ex-husband with absolute perfection. While the media dissected every chapter of Meghan's life, her royal debut, her wedding, the bombshell Oprah interview, the move to California, the Netflix series, the memoir, Trevor remained completely, immovably quiet. No unauthorized interviews, no anonymous tips to tabloids, no carefully leaked grievances through intermediaries, nothing. And in a world where everyone sells their story, where former friends and disgruntled employees regularly cash in on celebrity proximity, Trevor's silence was almost louder than words. It told the world, this man has something worth keeping quiet about. But ask yourself this, why would a successful, well-adjusted man with zero financial motive suddenly decide to break a silence he has maintained with such discipline for over 10 years? What changes? What finally tips the scale? According to insiders close to Trevor, the answer has less to do with money and everything to do with something far more personal, the erasure of the truth. Sources suggest that watching his own history, his role in her career, his emotional investment, his very existence in her story, get systematically wiped from the public record was something Trevor tolerated for a long time. But as the reinvention became more elaborate, as the narrative became more polished, and as the original version of events drifted further and further from reality, the weight of that silence reportedly became too much to carry. He is not looking for a comeback. He is reportedly looking for recognition of the truth. And in 2026, he has decided the world deserves to hear it. The FedEx divorce. What really happened in 2013? Before we can talk about what Trevor is reportedly preparing to reveal, we need to revisit the event that started everything. The moment that, by most accounts, set the tone for everything that followed. The way Meghan Markle ended her first marriage. In 2013, Trevor Engelson was in Los Angeles. Meghan was in Toronto, filming Suits, the legal drama that had given her a taste of real fame and a platform that was rapidly expanding her social world. The couple had been married for 2 years. By all accounts, Trevor had been a devoted partner, using his industry connections to help her career, supporting her through the grinding years of auditions and near misses, and standing by her when the opportunities were few and far between. Then came a package in the mail, delivered via registered mail. Inside were Meghan's wedding and engagement rings. No phone call, no final conversation, no face-to-face meeting to close a chapter that had started with a genuine commitment. Just a cold, clinical package that reduced years of marriage to a canceled subscription. The rings in an envelope, the relationship over. No explanation required. Now stop and think about what that tells us, because the how of a breakup matters just as much as the why. When you end a relationship through a FedEx package, when you cannot bring yourself to look someone in the eye and have even a brief, difficult conversation, it reveals something about your relationship to accountability. It reveals a willingness to treat people as stepping stones, rather than as human beings worthy of basic respect. Trevor was reportedly blindsided. He had no warning, no preparation, and no real explanation. One day he was a married man with a partner he had invested years of his life in. The next, he was holding 2 rings and reading between the lines of an act so cold it barely qualified as a goodbye. Insiders who knew the couple during those Toronto years described the period leading up to the divorce as a calculated social migration. As Suits took off and Meghan's profile grew, her circle began to change. Old friends, people who had known her before the fame, were quietly filtered out. In their place came high-profile Canadian socialites, power players, and connections who could offer something more valuable than loyalty. Access. Access to a world that was bigger than cable television and bigger than Hollywood. Trevor, by multiple accounts, was left behind, not just physically, while she was in Toronto and he was in LA, but emotionally. He was the man who knew her before the reinvention. And that, as we are about to see, is precisely what makes him so dangerous to the narrative she has spent years building. The vision board and the $100 million miscalculation. Here is where the story takes a turn that even the most seasoned royal watchers were not fully prepared for. And here is where we need you to pay very close attention, because this is the allegation that reportedly has Meghan's entire PR operation in emergency mode. Meghan famously told the world during her Oprah interview that she had no idea what she was getting into when she met Prince Harry. She claimed she did not even know who he was before their supposed blind date. She painted a picture of 2 strangers brought together by serendipity, connecting over nothing more than their shared humanity. But sources who were in Meghan's inner circle during the Trevor years, people who knew her long before she was the Duchess of Sussex, tell a very different story. And according to insiders close to Trevor, the rumors of a very specific vision board have been circulating in certain circles for years. Not a general vision board about happiness or career goals. A targeted one. One that reportedly had a very specific individual pinned at its center, Prince Harry. The narrative of the star-crossed lovers who met purely by chance is, by all accounts, one of the most beautiful and emotionally compelling stories Meghan has ever told. It is also, if these allegations are accurate, one of the most deliberately constructed ones. Sources suggest that rather than a serendipitous romantic encounter, the meeting was the product of a sustained, strategic campaign to position herself in the right circles, at the right time, with the right access. Meghan reportedly studied Prince Harry with the dedication of someone preparing for the role of a lifetime. His vulnerabilities, his emotional triggers, his well-documented yearning for a family of his own, a deeply human desire that had been documented and discussed for years. his isolation within a royal institution that had never fully known how to handle him, his history with women who had reportedly been frightened off by the scrutiny that came with royal life. He was not just the most eligible bachelor on the planet. He was, allegedly, a carefully identified target. But here is where the plan reportedly hit a wall. A very large, very financially significant wall. According to insiders, the single most catastrophic miscalculation in the entire operation was the assumption that a British prince was a billionaire. It seems almost comically straightforward in hindsight. Of course, a working royal's wealth is complicated, tied up in trusts, subject to institutional oversight, and nowhere near the liquid, freely accessible fortune of, say, a Hollywood entertainment mogul. But the assumption was apparently made, and when reality arrived in the form of cold, hard math, when it became clear that being royal came with a budget, and that the royal bank account was not going to fund the lifestyle she had envisioned, the fairy tale hit a very hard ceiling. This, many argue, is the single clearest explanation for what we see playing out in Montecito in 2026. The luxury jam sales, the dog biscuits, the herbal tea, the lifestyle brand launched with tremendous fanfare and increasingly desperate energy. This is not a hobby project. This is a woman who made a calculation that did not add up, and is now scrambling to generate the kind of wealth she thought came with a title. And Trevor Engelson, allegedly, has the receipts on exactly when and how this calculation was being made. Harry's shock, the man behind closed doors. While Meghan's team has reportedly gone into full crisis mode, the reaction from Prince Harry himself has been, according to sources, something altogether different and in many ways more revealing. Harry, by all accounts, is not angry in the way Meghan is. He is not issuing threats or scrambling legal teams. He is reportedly doing something far more telling. He is embarrassed. Visibly, deeply, almost paralyzingly embarrassed. Think about what that means. Harry gave up everything for this life. His family, his military titles, his country, his relationship with his father, his brother, his grandmother in her final years. He traded the only world he had ever known for a vision of Hollywood success and American freedom that was sold to him as a liberation from the oppressive institution that had supposedly failed him. And now that vision is being dismantled, piece by piece, in public. Sources close to the Montecito estate describe Harry in 2026 as a man who is exhausted, not just physically, but emotionally. A man who spent years being the shield for a narrative he believed in, only to find himself increasingly unable to defend it. He is reportedly spending more and more time in separate wings of the mansion. He is focusing on his own projects, the Invictus Games, efforts to reconnect with his roots, almost as if he is quietly building an escape route back to something recognizable. The separation in their daily lives is no longer a rumor. Sources describe it as an established pattern. Charity events attended independently. Business meetings handled separately. Public appearances coordinated with the precision of a professional arrangement rather than a marriage. The power couple image has not just cracked. It has reportedly been quietly set aside by both parties, each navigating the wreckage of the narrative in their own way. And then there is the matter of his father. In April 2026, King Charles made an official visit to the United States. The media speculation was intense. Would this be the moment for reconciliation? Would the king meet his grandchildren for the first time in years? Harry reportedly sent a handwritten letter, a deeply personal gesture from a man not known for making them, expressing a desperate desire to reconnect. The response from the palace was a flat, formal refusal. No meeting. The visit was for official business only. The door, once again, closed. For Harry, this was reportedly devastating. He has reportedly told those close to him that he genuinely believed a path back to his family was still possible, that the damage, however severe, was not permanent, that there was still a future in which his children knew their grandfather. And sources suggest that when Harry tried to address this with Meghan, when he expressed his grief over the continued estrangement, Her response was not empathy or shared sorrow. It was reportedly a redirection, an insistence that the palace's refusal was connected to Trevor's memoir rumors, that the king's cold shoulder was part of a coordinated campaign to undermine the As Ever brand launch. Harry, according to insiders, has reportedly told Meghan to stop blaming his father for the Trevor situation. For a man who has defended her with extraordinary loyalty for years, this is a significant line to draw. It suggests that even Harry's patience has limits, and that those limits are being tested in ways that are becoming impossible to ignore. The memoir that could change everything. So what exactly is Trevor reportedly preparing to reveal? This is the question that everyone in Meghan's orbit is reportedly asking themselves at 3 in the morning. Here is what makes the potential memoir so uniquely dangerous. Trevor does not need to fabricate anything. He does not need to embellish or speculate. He was there. He lived it. He has the timeline. And critically, because the marriage ended in 2013, before Meghan became a public figure of any significance, there is no NDA, no legal document preventing him from telling every single thing he knows. That absence of an NDA is the nuclear option. When their marriage ended, Meghan was a cable TV actress. There was no PR team calculating the downstream implications of an unprotected ex-husband. There was no legal architecture built to contain the testimony of someone who had lived in her world. She walked away from that marriage, assuming Trevor would never have the leverage or the platform to matter. She was wrong. And in 2026, that oversight is reportedly the single most pressing crisis on her legal team's desk. Rumors of a multi-million-dollar memoir deal began circulating in late 2025. Unlike unauthorized biographies written from the outside looking in, Trevor would be writing from inside the room. He allegedly has the Toronto emails, private photographs from the period insiders referred to as the FedEx era. Correspondence that would give context to a relationship that has been conspicuously absent from Meghan's own carefully curated storytelling. But the most explosive allegations concern territory that goes well beyond a difficult divorce. They concern the biological realities of the Sussex children. There have been persistent, unsettled questions surrounding Archie and Lilibet, theories about surrogacy, questions about timelines, rumors about what was really happening behind the palace walls. For years, the mainstream media largely avoided this territory, treating it as the domain of conspiracy theorists and royal-watching extremists. But Trevor Engelson sits in a uniquely positioned place regarding this question. Sources allege that Trevor may have had a medical procedure during his marriage to Meghan, a procedure that would have had significant implications for their ability to conceive together. If those allegations are accurate, and if Trevor has documentation to support them, the implications extend far beyond personal embarrassment. They raise questions about the official birth narratives in a way that no tabloid theory ever has, because this time, the source is someone with direct, verifiable knowledge. This is not gossip. This is not speculation from a royal-watching blogger. This is potentially a first-hand account from a man who was legally married to Meghan Markle, with medical records and documented history to back it up. And if it challenges the narrative surrounding the royal bloodline, if it casts doubt on the official story of Archie and Lilibet's births, the implications are constitutional. Not just personal, not just reputational, but constitutionally significant in a way that would force the palace into an extraordinarily difficult position. Meghan's legal team is reportedly working around the clock to find any possible legal avenue to block the memoir. Cease and desist letters, threats of injunctions, frantic searches for any contractual language that might give them leverage. But with no NDA and a source who has spent 10 years building a reputation for credibility through silence, the options are reportedly running out fast. The brand collapse and the conspiracy pivot. While the Trevor situation is escalating behind closed doors, the public-facing crisis has its own timeline, and it is playing out with an almost theatrical inevitability. American Riviera Orchard was supposed to be the great commercial comeback. The lifestyle brand that would cement Meghan's identity as the next Gwyneth Paltrow or Martha Stewart, a tastemaker with a royal background and American entrepreneurial ambition. Launched with a carefully staged soft rollout in mid-2025, it was designed to generate aspirational buzz before a full commercial debut. Instead, it generated mockery. The initial focus on overpriced jam, actual jam, in actual jars, at prices that made even loyal supporters raise their eyebrows, set a tone that the brand never fully recovered from. The trademark applications faced rejection after rejection. The glossy Instagram aesthetic could not mask the fundamental question: what exactly is this brand selling, and who is it for? By early 2026, the pivot had arrived. American Riviera Orchard was quietly replaced by As Ever, a rebranding exercise that Meghan explained as meaning, as it's always been. Critics saw it differently. They saw a desperate attempt to escape the baggage of a failed launch and start fresh with a cleaner identity. Then came the logo scandal. Within weeks of the As Ever debut, civic leaders from a small Spanish town called Jerez de la Frontera publicly pointed out what appeared to be a striking resemblance between Meghan's new brand logo, featuring a palm tree flanked by two birds, and the town's ancient coat of arms. The mayor expressed shock. Legal teams on both sides reportedly began examining the similarities. The story went global. For a brand launch that was supposed to project effortless sophistication, this was catastrophic timing. And this is where the pattern becomes both fascinating and deeply telling. Meghan's response to every single one of these setbacks has been identical. The trademark rejection was not a result of a legal miscalculation. The logo resemblance was not a result of poor research. The brand failures were not a result of an overpriced product and an unclear target market. Every obstacle, every setback, every piece of negative coverage was, in Meghan's telling, evidence of sabotage. Coordinated, deliberate, institutional sabotage from the royal family. And the king's refusal to meet during his April 2026 U.S. visit? Also sabotage, timed, allegedly, to coincide with the As Ever launch and deliver maximum reputational damage. Trevor's memoir rumors? Also orchestrated from London, a weapon deployed by the palace to ensure she never finds professional footing in America. This victim narrative has been Meghan's operating system for years. It is the mechanism through which every failure is externalized, every accountability deflected, every inconvenient truth reframed as evidence of persecution. It worked beautifully when the enemy was faceless, a distant, stuffy institution, a royal family that the public was already primed to view with some skepticism. But in 2026, something has shifted. The public, even sympathetic observers, is beginning to ask a question that is proving difficult to answer. Why would a busy king with a cancer diagnosis and a functioning monarchy to run care about a jam brand in California? Why would the palace expend political and operational resources to undermine a lifestyle company that most of the world had never heard of? The logic, examined seriously, does not hold. And as the logic begins to crack, so does the narrative that depends on it. The disappearing A-list. Here is one of the most quietly significant developments in the entire Sussex story of 2026, and one that is easy to miss if you are not watching closely. The people who were once Meghan's most powerful protectors have gone silent. Cast your mind back to the early California years. The protective circle around Harry and Meghan was genuinely formidable. Oprah Winfrey gave them the platform for the most watched interview of the decade. Serena Williams was a vocal public advocate. The Clooneys, George and Amal, one of Hollywood's most powerful and influential couples, were reportedly close allies. The message from Hollywood's elite was clear. We stand with the Sussexes. That message is no longer being sent. When As Ever launched in early 2026, the silence from former allies was deafening. No high-profile endorsements, no celebrity unboxing videos, no social media shout-outs from the people who once championed the Sussex narrative with such visible enthusiasm. The Oprah camp went quiet. The Serena connection appears to have cooled. The broad, enthusiastic celebrity coalition that once surrounded the couple has quietly dissolved. Why? Because Hollywood, for all its performative politics and public virtue signaling, is at its core a business. And in business, you align yourself with brands that are profitable, associations that are career-enhancing, and stories that are trending upward. The Sussex brand is not trending upward. It is radioactive. It generates controversy that is increasingly difficult to spin, drama that is perpetually exhausting, and headlines that no longer move the needle in the direction any publicist wants. The A-list has, with characteristic Hollywood efficiency, simply moved on. There are fresher narratives, cleaner partnerships, and less complicated causes to champion. For Meghan, this abandonment is more than a social slight. It is a structural collapse. Her entire post-royal strategy was built on the premise that Hollywood connections could replace institutional royal support, that celebrity alliances could substitute for the platform she had given up. Without those alliances, without that protective shield of famous faces, the Montecito operation becomes increasingly isolated. Two people in a very large house, fighting battles on multiple fronts, with fewer and fewer people willing to fight alongside them. Harry's reckoning, a prince without a kingdom. Somewhere in all of this drama, in all the brand launches and memoir rumors and legal threats and log scandals, there is a deeply human story that tends to get lost. And it is the story of Prince Harry. Whatever you think of his choices, whatever your assessment of his judgment over the past several years, Harry is a man who made an extraordinary sacrifice based on a belief. He believed that leaving the institution, the family, the titles, the country, was the only way to live authentically. He believed that the life being offered to him in California, with a partner who seemed to see him clearly and love him without condition, was worth every bridge he burned to reach it. In 2026, that belief is being tested in a way that no PR strategy can manage and no spin can soften. The King's refusal to meet during the April visit was not just a diplomatic rebuff. For Harry, it was reportedly another chapter in the slow-dawning realization that the life he walked away from is not waiting for him to return to it. Time has moved on. The monarchy has adjusted. New chapters have been written without him. The reconciliation that he has reportedly been quietly working toward, the restoration of at least some version of his family relationships, appears further away than ever. And the Trevor situation cuts even deeper. Because if the allegations in the memoir prove to be accurate, if the carefully told story of how Harry and Meghan met, fell in love, and committed to each other is revealed to be something rather different beneath the surface, then Harry is not just embarrassed publicly. He is privately grappling with the possibility that the entire foundation of the life he chose was built on something other than what he was told. That is an almost unbearable thing to sit with, and sources suggest he is sitting with it. The reports of separate lives, different wings of the mansion, independently attended events, a professional arrangement where the personal warmth has quietly drained away, are no longer whispers. They are the observable reality of a marriage that has stopped performing as a marriage, even if the formal structure remains intact. Divorce rumors have circulated before. They have been denied, dismissed, and reframed as tabloid fabrication. But in 2026, what is different is that the denials sound tired. They lack the conviction they once carried. The people who once jumped to defend the couple now hesitate. And the logical conclusion to everything playing out, the Trevor memoir, the brand failures, the royal estrangement, the A-list abandonment, the separate lives, is one that the Sussex camp is running out of ways to convincingly resist. What comes next? The clock is ticking. So where does all of this end? Because that is the question underneath all the drama, all the allegations, all the carefully worded denials. What does the next chapter actually look like? If Trevor Engelson publishes a full memoir, and the report suggests the deal is close, the receipts are real, and the legal options to stop it are running out, the consequences will be swift and seismic. Not just for Meghan's reputation, but for the entire constructed narrative that has sustained the Sussex brand through multiple controversies and failures. A memoir from Trevor would not just be another critical voice. It would be a primary source, someone who was there, someone who has documentation, someone who, in 10 years of dignified silence, built a level of public trust that no amount of PR can manufacture. When Trevor says something, people will believe it, because the man who stays quiet for a decade has a credibility that the man who sells his story immediately never earns. The allegations about the children, about medical history, about biological realities that contradict the official narrative, would move from the fringes of internet speculation to the front pages of mainstream publications worldwide. The palace, which has historically maintained silence on such matters to avoid constitutional scandal, would face an extraordinary dilemma. And the constitutional implications, if the succession narrative was built on something false, would create a crisis with no clear resolution. For Harry, the choices are narrowing. Return to an institution that has largely moved on without him. Stay in California and manage a marriage that sources describe as increasingly strained. Or find a third path, something neither entirely royal nor entirely the Hollywood dream, that allows him to rebuild a life on terms that are actually sustainable. And for Meghan, the window for narrative control is closing in a way that may be irreversible. Every story requires a protagonist who is relatable, sympathetic, and fundamentally believable. When the first person who truly knew you decides to tell his version, and when his version is backed by documentation that predates any PR operation, the story you have been telling about yourself is no longer the only one. It is just one version, and possibly not the most accurate one. The bigger picture, what this moment means. Step back from the individual players for a moment, because there is something happening here that is bigger than Trevor Engelson, bigger than Meghan Markle, and bigger even than the British royal family. There is a cultural reckoning taking shape. For years, the Sussex story was powered by something very specific: the emotional appeal of the outsider narrative. The mixed-race American actress, the younger prince, the suffocating institution, the brave couple who walked away from privilege to live authentically. It was a story designed to resonate, and it did, powerfully. For millions of people, Harry and Meghan represented something meaningful. The idea that you could refuse the terms that were handed to you and build something better on your own. But stories have architecture. And the architecture of the Sussex narrative depended on the idea of Meghan as a genuine outsider, someone who stumbled into royalty through love, was mistreated by an institution that could not accept her, and fought back with nothing but her truth. If Trevor's account suggests that the stumbling was actually calculated, that the love story was partially engineered, that the victim status was a constructed position rather than an authentic experience, then the architecture does not just crack, it collapses. And it collapses in a way that is genuinely difficult to reconstruct, because the original emotional appeal was built entirely on the premise of authenticity. The public, even those who were once passionate Sussex supporters, can forgive many things. They can forgive ambition. They can forgive flaws and contradictions. What they find genuinely hard to forgive is the feeling of being deceived, of having invested emotionally in a story that was, at its foundation, a performance. That is the real danger of Trevor's testimony. Not the specific allegations, as serious as they are, but the possibility that it forces a mass reassessment. A moment when millions of people who followed this story closely look back at everything: the Oprah interview, the Netflix documentary, the memoir, the brand launches, and wonder what was real and what was carefully staged. That is not a conversation that any PR firm can manage, and it is one that, in 2026, appears to be underway. Trevor Engelson spent over a decade saying nothing. He watched from a distance as the woman he had once loved became one of the most famous and polarizing people on the planet. He watched his own role in her story quietly erased. He built his own life, found his own happiness, and exercised a restraint that, in the media ecosystem of the modern world, is almost freakishly rare. But silence, as we have established, has an expiration date. The question is no longer whether Trevor will tell his story. The question is how much of it will be told, when it will land, and how much of what Meghan and Harry have built can survive the impact. Harry is reportedly in shock. Not the performative shock of a man playing a role, but the genuine private shock of someone watching the ground shift beneath everything he believed he was standing on. The man who gave up a kingdom for a story is now watching that story be contested by the man who knew it before it was ever told. And Meghan? Meghan is fighting on every front simultaneously. The brand failures, the logo scandal, the legal threats, the absent allies, the deteriorating marriage, the approaching memoir. Every fire she puts out seems to start 3 more. She built an empire on reinvention, but Trevor Engelson was there before the reinvention began, and he remembers who she was. The world is about to find out. If you have followed this story from the beginning, if you remember where it started and how far it has traveled, then you understand why this moment matters. Leave a comment below and tell us. Do you think Trevor's account will finally shift the public conversation? And if the memoir drops, what do you think Harry does next? Hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications, because the next chapter of this story is coming faster than anyone expected, and we will be here when it does.